This film is based on a true story. The events unfold in the 1950s. 10-year-old Carrie Staley is grieving deeply after losing her mother 7 months earlier. The girl loves movies, they help take her mind off things. She often imagines what her life could have been like. One evening while returning from the cinema, Carrie gets on a bus and witnesses one man attacking another and taking his life. It comes as a great shock to the girl. Carrie's father decides that a change of scenery would do his daughter good, so he sends her to spend the summer with the family of his friend, Landy Bretthorst, in a small town in Missouri. For Carrie, arriving there feels like stepping into a fairy tale from the movies, only with far more color. Landy lives with his wife, Bea, and they have a 10-year-old daughter, Lucy. The Bretthorsts own 2 acres of farmland. They have also recently opened a bakery. Landy is planning to bring home his sister, Grace, who has spent the last 17 years in a psychiatric hospital. Grace once had a husband, Dan Jones, but that no longer means anything. It took Landy a great deal of time to convince the hospital administration that Grace would be better off at home. The family prepares to welcome Grace into their home. Meanwhile, Dan Jones feels guilty. He has a new wife now, and they are preparing for the birth of their child. Ella Jean does not object to her husband going with Landy. Dan says nothing, only smiles. Grace is insane, and she has spent many years in confinement. Landy takes the girls with him so they can all go together to get Grace. They have a long trip to Oklahoma ahead of them. The institution where Grace is being kept is meant for violent patients with severe mental disorders. Landy tells the girls that Grace was struck by a truck on her wedding day. She suffered terrible injuries and survived against all odds, but she never recovered psychologically. Grace's family could do nothing to help her, so they had to make the painful decision to place her in a psychiatric institution. Landy and the girls arrive in Oklahoma. The chief doctor warns Landy, telling him that Grace is a hopeless patient. If there had ever been a chance of curing her, she would never have been placed there. In the doctor's professional opinion, Grace is no longer capable of living freely. Madness is unfathomable, treacherous. But Landy is still determined to take his sister home. The chief doctor decides to give Landy a tour of the hospital so he can see for himself how patients in such a place behave. The woman also warns him that children should not be staying in the same part of the house as Grace. At last Landy is allowed into Grace's room. She seems perfectly sane and calm, despite everything the medical staff had claimed. Lucy is overjoyed that her aunt will now be living with them. Landy brings his sister home. Grace believes she will be able to start life over. Landy tells her how much the world has changed over the years, what cinema has become. The woman eagerly looks forward to the day they go to the movies. To celebrate Grace's return, the family throws a party attended by relatives, friends and neighbors. Everyone knows how much effort Landy put into getting his sister out of the psychiatric hospital. Grace hesitates before going downstairs to greet the guests. She is very nervous. Bea hugs her and promises that everything will be all right. Everyone Grace grew up with is waiting for her. If they can show that she is doing well, her adjustment will be easier. Bea pins Grace's mother's brooch to her dress, and they go downstairs to join the guests. Everyone asks how she is feeling and admires her long hair. Grace feels out of place. Dan and Ella Jean arrive as well. They were not sure they would be welcome there, given the circumstances. Landy assures them that everything is fine. But Dan is still ashamed that he was unable to stand by Landy. Even though Landy holds no grudge, he could not allow his sister to spend even one more day in those horrible conditions. Otherwise it all would have weighed on their conscience. When Grace sees Dan among the guests, she walks over to him but cannot utter a single word. Her feelings flare up with renewed force. Landy had already told his sister that Dan was married, and until that moment she believed she had accepted it. Dan decides that it would be better for him and his wife to leave. Grace follows them, paying no attention to the rain. Ella Jean thinks Dan and Grace ought to speak openly, so that everything between them can finally be cleared up. Ella Jean walks away, leaving them alone. Dan says how deeply he suffered, but in the end he had to find the strength to go on living. Grace silently rests her head on his shoulder. The man repeats again and again how sorry he is. So they stand there in each other's arms in the rain. It cannot last long, because Dan has a pregnant wife waiting for him at home. Grace cannot hold back her tears. Seeing how upset the woman is, Carrie tries to comfort her. Grace says how much she loves Dan Jones, and even after all these years her feelings have not faded. The girl realizes she is talking about their neighbor. They live across the road. Grace remembers that on her wedding day, it turned out there was no bouquet. She wanted flowers so badly that she went out to the field. Landy and Bea feel relieved. Everything went wonderfully, everyone welcomed Grace warmly. The couple have no doubt that things will get better now. Instead of going to bed, Lucy and Carrie sneak off to a revival for black people. It is a lot of fun there, so the girls enjoy it. This is not the first time they have done it. Landy and Bea know about their secret, but prefer not to interfere. Grace cannot sleep, so she goes out for a walk still wearing her nightgown, and sees Tom Hendricks escorting the girls home. Later, Lucy excitedly tells her father about the sermon. The girl wishes he would go there with them sometime. Landy promises that they will definitely go together on Friday evening. It feels strange to Grace that she no longer has to live by a strict schedule. She can wake up and eat whenever she wants. After so many years of confinement, Grace will need time to adjust. Several serious floods have struck this area. Many families have been left homeless. Landy gives bread to the victims free of charge. Reverend Potter appreciates Landy's kindness, but at the same time Grace's return troubles him. 17 years in a psychiatric hospital could not have passed without leaving a mark on her. The Reverend fears that Grace's presence may have a negative effect on their community. Landy, however, does not give a damn what anyone thinks about it. His sister's well-being matters more than anything to him. The Reverend knows the asylum Grace was in, and warns Landy yet again. No one could ever recover from something like that. If Grace gets out of control, they will not be able to do anything, since the sheriff is in Columbia. The girls go to the movie theater. After the screening, a cadet boy invites Carrie to a dance, which thrills the girls. Carrie has never been on a real date before. The Bretthorsts attend Sunday service. Grace whispers a prayer, asking God to give her the strength to get through all this. Her eyes meet Ella Jean's. With every passing second, it becomes harder for Grace to keep herself under control. Bea and Landy cannot help noticing it. They hurry to get Grace out of there. She has grown too unaccustomed to ordinary life. Wet weather has set in. While Landy tirelessly helps the flood victims, Bea and the girls prepare dinner. They fool around, throwing flour at one another. Suddenly there is a knock at the door. It is Dan who has come to visit Grace. An awkwardness instantly rises between them. Dan thanks her for the way she has taken everything. He would like to say much more as well, but he knows he cannot cross that line. Grace is in despair. The people around her think she is crazy. She has nothing left. 17 years of her life are gone forever. The woman has lost not only time but something far more important, love. The water is spilling over the banks, and the bakery could be washed away, so Landy has to act right now. His whole family helps him. Grace desperately needs to talk to her brother, but he has no time for that at the moment. Every minute matters. Grace is left home completely alone and talks to herself. She has already forgotten what it means to be free, and she does not know how to control it. Landy returns home late. He is utterly exhausted. If this goes on, the disaster will affect every resident. While the couple are talking about it in their bedroom, Grace cuts off part of her hair. Thinking she is still asleep, Landy and Bea leave for the bakery. But Grace is not asleep, she is dancing, gradually slipping into madness. Knowing that Grace is good at sewing, Ella Jean comes by and asks whether she would like to take on a little work. The woman needs blankets for the baby. She holds out some fabric to Grace. Grace takes the fabric, and without saying a word, slams the door right in Ella Jean's face. Later, Grace does make Carrie a dress, just as she promised. It is beautiful, almost too beautiful. Carrie goes to the dance with the cadet boy. The girl feels like a princess at a ball. Afterwards, she excitedly tells Lucy how it all went. The Bretthorsts have taken in kittens rescued after the flood. Before dinner, Landy says a prayer, thanking God for everything they have. He believes the flood is a trial sent to them, and that they must endure it with dignity by helping one another. Lucy and Grace grow closer. At times the woman misses the days when she was allowed to be crazy. Now everything is different. Grace does not know who she is. Lucy supports the woman and suggests they do something crazy, go fishing together in the morning. Grace likes the idea, and at daybreak they leave without telling anyone. When he finds neither Lucy nor Grace in their rooms, Landy wakes Carrie and asks whether she knows where they are. Sleepy, the girl answers that they have gone fishing at the quarry. The weather rapidly turns worse, and a storm begins. The boat overturns, and Lucy and Grace fall into the water. Grace descends into madness and grabs Lucy, not letting her surface. Lucy loses consciousness. Grace lets go of her and swims to shore. A man who witnessed it dives in, and pulls Lucy out. By the time Landy arrives, it is already too late, his daughter is no longer breathing. The man weeps in despair. The funeral falls on Carrie's birthday. The tragedy has shaken the entire town. Bea, like Ella Jean and the other women, is inconsolable. He says that their heavenly Father must have called Lucy to him for something very important. Carrie can't believe this is really happening. It's the worst birthday of her life. Landy says goodbye to his daughter, unable to understand why God has sent such trials upon his family. Bea can barely stand, she is completely drained. After everyone leaves, Grace remains alone in the church, tearfully repeating that it was an accident. Then she descends into madness. Bea does not know how to go on living. Landy has to stay strong for his wife and for Carrie, who cannot stop crying. The man asks Carrie to help him at the bakery. He gathers all his strength so as not to let himself give up. Bea copes with it in her own way, trying to keep all her thoughts occupied with cooking. Grace is still staying in their house, and her behavior is becoming more and more uncontrollable. In spite of everything, Landy does not want to send his sister back to the asylum. It was his decision in the first place, which means it is his responsibility. Bea, however, has no intention of accepting that, and she does not care that Grace feels remorse. That does not change the fact that Lucy is never coming back. Bea and Landy have faced every parent's worst nightmare. Grace prays to God to save her soul and give her the strength to get through this. As the water continues to rise rapidly, and nearly all the roads are flooded, the Bretthorsts decide it would be best to send Carrie back to her father, for her own safety. But the girl wants to stay because Bea needs her. Through tears, the woman embraces Carrie. So Carrie will not be bored, Bea lets the neighbor girls spend the night at their house. During the night, Grace wanders through the rooms with scissors in her hands, muttering that they are sinners, which frightens the girls terribly. Awakened by the commotion, Landy tries to bring his sister back to reality, while Bea hurries to lead the girls out of the room. Landy wrests the scissors from his sister and tries to lock her in the room, which triggers another violent outburst. He boards up the window, just to keep Grace from getting out. The canal has overflowed its banks, the road is flooded, and there is no stopping it now. The flood is moving toward the town with dreadful inevitability, so the residents must see to supplies and shelter. Bea knows that her husband has to go. Even a minute's delay could cost them dearly. The woman promises that she will manage. Landy and several other men save whoever and whatever they can, while the women and children remain in their homes for as long as it is still safe. Bea discovers that Grace has managed to escape and wakes Carrie. She sees Grace standing beneath the window of the Jones house. Ella Jean is asleep, suspecting nothing. Bea urges Grace to come to her senses and return to the house. Many believe that Grace herself is the cause of all these calamities. It was right after her return that terrible disasters began to fall upon the town. Bea does manage to persuade Grace to come back into the house, but almost at once she loses control again. Grace grabs the scissors and screams that she has to see Dan, that Ella Jean stole her life. Bea does everything she can to calm the madwoman. Grace, having completely lost her mind, wounds Bea and runs off. A neighboring woman finds the injured Bea and calls for help, but it is already too late, the wound is too severe. Bea dies before Carrie's eyes. When Landy learns that his wife is dead, he feels that he has nothing left to lose. He points a shotgun at Grace. She has taken everything from him. Landy cannot understand why she is doing this, when all he wanted was to help her. Carrie begs the man not to shoot. In the end he lowers the gun. The downpour stops. Landy is utterly alone now. Bringing Grace back from the psychiatric hospital was the biggest mistake of his life, and he has to set it right. Landy and Dan lock Grace in an improvised cage so they can take her back. She is a danger to herself and to others. Carrie goes with Landy, no matter how hard he tries to talk her out of it. The townspeople look at Grace with contempt, and at Landy with sympathy. Everyone knows that he is a good man who has been dealt terrible trials. The road is long. Grace keeps crying, hoping to soften her brother's heart, but he can no longer help her in any way. Again and again, Grace begs him not to send her back. Landy decides that Carrie will stay with a kind woman until tomorrow, and then he will buy her a plane ticket. The girl's father will be waiting for her at the airport tomorrow. Carrie would like to stay with Landy to the very end, but he knows he must do this alone. He thanks the girl for everything, and they say goodbye. That summer with Landy, his family and Grace will stay with Carrie for the rest of her life. Landy drives on with Grace, but at some point at the Oklahoma state line, he lets her out. The woman revels in the freedom and the wind. Then a shot rings out. Landy could not have done otherwise. After returning home, Carrie writes Landy several more letters, but she never sees him again, or the cadet boy.